Good evening and welcome back to a new episode of TSHL 101. I'm Gary Emmert and alongside with Gary Gerstenhaber, and today we're going to continue our conversation with two of the newest members of the Texas Silver-Haired Legislature, Eric and Carol Hammersen.
Do you have any thoughts about how we could improve our capability to get the word out?
Well, I think that this program that we're speaking on today is a great example of how we can do that. We've already had the opportunity to do an interview with a local radio station here. We've talked to the local newspaper that we have here. I think that because Texas is so large and each community is a unique community, while there's some commonalities, it is very different to if you're in a large city, if you're in a mid-sized city, if you're in a small town, or if you're out in a very rural county. And I think that there's not a one-size-fits-all as a solution. I think this simply takes persistence on the part of the TSHL legislators to continue to reach out to their local communities, to the leaders in the community, to the residents in the community. And it's like advertising. You don't say it once and presume that the people got the message. You have to continue to go back and go back. And so I think that the material that we have, the brochure is very helpful that we have.
Yes.
The presentation that we can give to organizations. We're giving presentations to the local Rotary clubs, the Lions Club, to various churches that have elder programs and other organizations here in town, just to raise that awareness. And it then becomes a multiplying effect. Those people can tell other people. We're a firm believer in the wisdom of the crowd for coming up with solutions to problems, identifying what the problems are and coming up with what would be a reasonable solution, with the understanding that's now a long process where we're going to go through that. Whatever the ideas they come up with right now aren't going to be put before the legislature that's coming into session.
We've emphasized that as we've spoken to individuals and to groups, that just like the legislature is on a 2-year cycle, we're on a 2-year cycle as well. And so if you come to us with the most cost-free, brilliant idea, it'll still take some time to get it through.
And we found some payoff on that. There's a group of gentlemen about my age, mostly retired military, who live here, and we get together for lunch. And after I gave them a talk on what it was we did, they've been coming back literally every week saying, I've come up with another idea. I've come up with another idea. I've come up with another idea. So we're capturing that information, but you can't do that by just sitting at home. You've got to actually go out and talk with individuals.
Yeah, it was really interesting to me, and why I really wanted to have the Hammersens on was because they showed no fear at our legislative session in Austin. A lot of the newbies, they kind of stayed quiet, but the Hammersens spoke up, made really good points on several topics. It was really great to see that. So,
well, we were very impressed with how friendly
Yes.
and how welcoming the members of the legislature were that had been there for several sessions. And we were also astonished at the pace.
Yeah.
It started at 6:30 in the morning over breakfast, where you were sitting with other legislators, and then you moved to the Capitol and you did the work that was there during the day. Then you came back and you continued to work until 10 or even 11 o'clock at night, refining resolutions that had been proposed, that had been tabled, that there were changes that needed to be made, going back through the committees, so that we were able to get to the very end of by the time the session began the next morning, we would have a refined version to go back for consideration once again.
It was like watching a lot of the Energizer Bunny representatives having a meeting to discuss the issues of Texas. Like Eric said, though, I want to get smart personally, and I'm not good with names. One of my dream ideas is that by next year, I'll know everybody's name. I'm not sure that I'll get there, but I would like to think that I'm going to try. And one of the things that we have done, and this is very nonpartisan, we have an acquaintance in our community who served in the legislature as a staffer, and we have one who was a representative, and we're talking to both of them
so that we can get smart on the legislative process as it actually unfolds.
Yes. How
understanding, what are the committees, what are the roles and responsibilities, not simply looking at it from afar, but talking with people who engaged in it day in and day out for years.
For multiple years. And we also want to know what worked best as you saw people approaching to advocate for things. Obviously, small bites, good sound research, and low cost is always a plus. But everyone needs to be approached slightly differently, and we want to help them to help us get smart on it. Not that we're going to necessarily carry the water for them, and because this is, well, I think they're from two different parties. If you knew them, you would see that quite clearly. So we see this as a balancing act to get really firsthand feedback from the people who've done it.
Well, Charles Sagoma and I were on a panel during the last week for the Texas Elder Justice Group, and one of the questions that the host asked was, "What are the barriers to getting things done?" Now that you guys have been speaking to some other folks who have been in the service and understand, so what do you see as the barriers?
I think oftentimes it's the press of other issues. One of the first questions to ask of any legislator is, what are the issues that are important to you? What are the issues that you see are important to your constituents? And then identify of those issues, what are the ones that TSHL already has a resolution that we would like them to consider, see whether or not they would like to do that. I'm not going there to represent, this is the resolution that I wrote or that I voted on or something like that. These are resolutions that we believe will help the lives of older Texans. And trying to put that together, if that particular representative or senator has got some other issue that they think is important, how can we align one of the resolutions that we have with something that's already important to them? In other words, meet them where they already are. Time is the most important commodity that any leader has. City, county, state, national. You have to be able to get your message across quickly and concisely. In order to be able to have them listen to you, you have to be trusted. And so that trust is something that is built over time. You don't want to wait until there's some crisis and then try and say, hey, I'd like to order a cup of trust. It doesn't work that way. You have to actually be engaging on a routine and repetitive basis with the representative or the senator and their staff. The staff are the ones, small as they are, that get so much of the work done. And so having them realize that they can get in touch with you, here's my phone number, and then following up with them on the issues that you have discussed. I think that those probably are the things that everybody in TSHL does all the time. We're brand new to this, so we're trying to get in there and do the part that we can do.
You know, it was interesting at this Texas Elder Justice Coalition meeting. When they talked about the barriers, they obviously are after items and needs that they're exactly focused on. But the common theme was, we don't quit.
Yes.
So I think they borrowed that from the TSHL from Mike Taylor, because that's certainly his tagline. But you know, the barriers right now, if you look at what the governor has put out about the issues that he's concerned about, there's really not much room for anything other than what he's concerned about, at least at the beginning of the legislative session. So it's going to be, I think, an interesting chore to get people focused on any of our resolutions that aren't dealing with something that is particular to water, electricity, and those kind of items, and our natural resources.
And fortunately, we have a number of resolutions that do address those particular topics. And so that gets your foot in the door early on in the legislative session with people who say that, now I realize these are the priorities that you have been given from the governor. Here are things where we can collaborate. That doesn't mean that there isn't going to be something else that comes along. I mean, this, as we know, there were thousands of pieces of legislature that were put forward during the last session. And so there are going to continue to be lots that are done.
It makes me, that interests me. As you have your first legislative session behind you, what would you share with new members or with people who are considering joining the TSHL?
Well, I've had the opportunity to be part of various organizations, large and small, for many, many years. You would look long and hard to try and find some organization to join that would have a greater impact than TSHL does. When you look back on the history of this organization since it was first created, it is astonishing how many pieces of legislation have actually come into being because of the work that TSHL did advocating for those particular issues. Like I said, you would be hard pressed to find any other organization that has that level of impact.
I think when you look at that, when we make that known to people, the organization sells itself. When we moved here, Eric grew up in Texas. I made the choice to come to Texas when we retired because he let me pick where we were going. After 23 houses, he said I could do the 24th. And so I came here wanting to be the voice of older Texans through activities, through interests. But now I realize I want to be the person who listens, who coordinates and advocates in that order, because I think it's really important to listen first. And here again, it goes with people who are closest to the problems often have the simplest, most common sense answers to the problems. And so it is an issue of being able to respect that wisdom that we've all accumulated by the time and to accommodate their needs for how it's presented to some extent too. So, to me, this is the best thing I can do. I can be in a lot of clubs and do a lot of little things in my own community, but this is not a club. This is a mission.
If somebody said to you, well, y'all are lobbyists, what would your response be?
Well, actually, under the law, we are actually an adjunct created by the legislature and signed into law by the governor more than 40 years ago to be the voice of older Texans in the Capitol. And we are the only entity that is legally allowed to make recommendations, as opposed to just saying, hey, I'm a lobbyist, I want this, I want that, I want the other thing. We actually are able to make recommendations to the legislature for issues that affect older Texans. We're not lobbyists.
I think most of my adult life, every job I have chosen has required me to be an advocate. I also have training as a facilitator and as a mediator, though I've decided I'm much better at facilitation than mediation. I can keep my opinions to myself, but sometimes it's, that's a different story. But here, this is the absolute level playing field. Being military, we never had a political sign in our yard. When we had elections locally, we invited everybody in our neighborhood to come and hear the two candidates for mayor on a different day. So we had no, I said this and I'm going to say that, neutrality. This is a good idea, stands on its own. We don't have to say, well, this person endorses it or that group says we shouldn't do it. We advocate for the people who need the support, the assistance, the consideration. And we're very persistent and we are very good at research.
The point Carol made about not having bumper stickers or political signs that are, when I was in the military and then when I was a federal civilian, we were prohibited by law from lobbying. We couldn't do that. Right. But there was nothing that said we couldn't inform. And we did. I got to spend way more time than I wanted to up on Capitol Hill, informing representatives and senators and their staffs of issues that were important, in this particular case, to national security issues. So this is something that I'm not uncomfortable with. And I also realize it's a process. It's not something where you flip a switch and, we've now solved this. These are issues that are very complex in many cases, and there always are trade-offs. One of the points we would make in a previous job I had was, we hired you because you have really great ideas. You're going to come up with proposals and suggestions. What current ongoing activity do you want to see defunded in order we can pay for what it is that you came up with as a good idea? There's a finite number of resources, and you have to do the very best you can with the resources that are available. And part of those resources are money, and part of those resources are time.
Well, that brings us to the close of today's edition of TSHL 101. Our thanks again to Eric and Carol Hammersen for sharing their perspectives as two of the newest members of the TSHL. Their commitment to listening, learning, and advocating for older Texans reflects the very heart of what the Texas Silver-Haired Legislature stands for. If today's conversation has sparked your interest, whether in the issues TSHL addresses, the legislative process, or the opportunity to serve, there is a place where you can go to learn more. Visit tshl.org, where you'll find information on the organization's mission, current resolutions, member stories, and how you can get involved. We appreciate you spending part of your day with us. And for Gary Gerstenhaber, I'm Gary Emmert, and we'll see you next time on TSHL 101. And as always, thank you for staying engaged, informed, and connected to the work that strengthens the lives of older Texans.